The ocean was louder than my thoughts that morning, crashing against the shore like it was trying to warn me. But I didn't listen. I stood at the kitchen window of my mother's beach house, watching the pale sunlight crawl slowly across the wooden floor she had polished by hand for decades. The smell of salt mixed with old coffee grounds and lemon soap, the same smell I'd known since childhood. This house had a way of pretending nothing ever changed, even when everything already had. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice light as I turned from the sink. "You're up early." She sat at the small round table, cardigan wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders, carefully buttering a slice of toast as if it were something fragile. "The seagulls don't let you sleep in," she replied, smiling faintly. "They think they own the place." I forced a laugh and poured coffee into her chipped blue mug, the one with a hairline crack she refused to replace. My hands shook just enough that I noticed, though I doubted she did. I had rehearsed this morning in my head 100 times, but none of those rehearsals had prepared me for the quiet. The house was too calm, too innocent. I sat across from her, the chair creaking the same way it always had. Outside, the waves rolled in and out, steady and patient. Inside, my chest felt tight, like something heavy was pressing down on it. "You didn't sleep well," she said, glancing up at me. "Mothers always know." "I slept fine," I lied, staring into my coffee instead of her eyes. "Just thinking about things." She nodded slowly, accepting that answer the way she always did, without pushing. That was her way. She had spent her whole life stepping back, so others could step forward. We ate in silence for a few moments. Toast, coffee, the ticking clock on the wall that had been there longer than I had. Every second felt louder than the last. "I was thinking," she said gently, "maybe later we can walk down to the shore. My knees are stiff, but the air helps." "Yeah," I replied quickly. "That sounds good." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, because I already knew we wouldn't. After breakfast, she rinsed her plate and set it in the drying rack with care, as if the house itself might feel pain if she wasn't gentle. I watched her move around the kitchen, touching counters, straightening a crooked picture frame, her fingers lingering like she was memorizing everything all over again. I followed her into the living room. The couch sagged in the middle, the same spot where my father used to nap on Sunday afternoons. His old blanket was still folded over the armrest, even though he'd been gone for 7 years. She said it made the room warmer. I sat on the edge of the couch, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid she could hear it. "Mom," I began, then stopped. The word felt heavier than usual. She turned to face me, her expression open, trusting. "What is it, sweetheart?" I swallowed. "There's something we need to talk about." Her smile softened but didn't disappear. "You sound serious." "I am." She lowered herself into her armchair slowly, exhaling as she settled in. "All right. I'm listening." For a moment, I couldn't speak. All I could see was her here, in this room, surrounded by a life she'd built and protected at the cost of her own dreams. I remembered her working double shifts, skipping vacations, fixing leaky faucets herself because hiring help was too expensive. I remembered her choosing this house because it was close to the water my father loved, even though she hated storms. "I've been worried about you," I said finally. "Living here alone." The stairs, the isolation. It's not safe forever. She tilted her head slightly. I've been here my whole life. I know, I said quickly. But things change. Her eyes searched my face, trying to understand where this was going. I stood up, pacing a little, the floor cool beneath my bare feet. I found a place, I said. Closer to me. Near the city. Doctors, neighbors, everything you need. Her brow furrowed. Found a place? Yes, I said, my voice gaining momentum as fear pushed me forward. It's nice. Small but comfortable. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or storms or… She held up a hand. Why are you telling me this now? I stopped pacing. This was it. There was no gentle way through anymore. We're going tomorrow, Mom, I said quietly. I've sold your beach house. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. She stared at me, her face draining of color. You, what? I handled everything, I rushed on. The paperwork, the buyers. It was a good offer. You'll be taken care of, I promise. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She looked around the room slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. You sold it? Without telling me? Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. I thought it would be easier this way. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. This house isn't just walls. It's my life. I know, I whispered. I know. She stood up, unsteady, placing a hand on the armrest for support. Then how could you do this to me? The question cut deeper than any accusation. I wanted to tell her everything then. About the letters I'd found. About the debt. About the promises she'd made that I'd never known. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. She turned away, pressing her palm against the window, staring out at the ocean she loved more than anything. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't cry in that moment. Watching her stand there in silence, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. Protecting someone can look a lot like betraying them. And whatever I thought I was saving her from, I had already taken something from her that could never be replaced. As the waves crashed outside, I understood that selling the house was only the beginning, and that the truth I was hiding would change everything once it finally surfaced. The house felt different after she stopped speaking, like it was holding its breath along with us. That afternoon passed in fragments. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the tide moved the way it always had, indifferent to the fact that something sacred inside these walls had cracked. My mother didn't say another word to me. She moved slowly from room to room, touching things, opening drawers, standing still for long stretches as if listening for a voice only she could hear. I followed her at a distance, unsure whether to help or stay out of her way. Every step I took felt wrong. When I reached for my phone, she glanced at it sharply. Who did you sell it to? She asked suddenly, her voice calm in a way that scared me more than anger. A couple, I said. From out of state. They loved the view. She let out a quiet, breathless laugh. Of course they did. I tried to explain then, to justify myself, but every reason sounded selfish the moment it left my mouth. Money, safety, convenience, none of it could compete with what this place meant to her. She went into her bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the peeling paint near the doorframe where she had once marked my height year after year. I hadn't noticed before how high the last mark was compared to where I stood now. When she finally emerged, she was holding an old cardboard box. "I'll start packing," she said quietly. "Mom, you don't have to do that now." "I do," she replied. "If I stop moving, I might fall apart." I nodded, swallowing hard. We packed together in near silence. She wrapped dishes in newspaper, folding each page neatly, smoothing the edges. I taped boxes, the ripping sound loud and violent in the quiet room. Every so often she would stop, staring at something in her hands, a photograph, a seashell, a receipt yellowed with age. "Your father brought this home the day you were born," she said at one point, holding up a small glass bottle filled with sand. "He said he wanted you to know where you came from." I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded and looked away. As evening crept in, shadows stretched across the walls. I made soup because I didn't know what else to do. The pot simmered softly on the stove while she sat at the table, her hands folded, watching the steam rise like something disappearing. "You didn't ask me," she said suddenly. "I was afraid you'd say no." She met my eyes then, really looked at me. "And you thought that meant you shouldn't ask?" The question landed heavier than any accusation. I leaned against the counter, exhausted. "I thought I was helping." She shook her head slowly. "Helping without listening isn't help." We ate in silence again. But it was a different silence now, thicker, sharper. Each spoonful felt like a reminder of everything we weren't saying. After dinner, she surprised me by pouring herself a small glass of wine. She hadn't done that in years. She took one sip, then another. "There are things you don't know," she said. My chest tightened. "About what?" She stared into the glass. "About this house. About why I stayed. Why I never left, even when I could have." I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and walked to the hallway closet, pulling out a stack of old envelopes tied with string. She placed them on the table between us. "Bills," she said. "Letters, promises." I reached for them, but she stopped me. "Not yet." She sat back down, her shoulders slumping. "Your father didn't die with nothing," she said softly. "He died owing people. A lot of people." I stared at her, stunned. "You never told me." "I didn't want you to carry it," she replied. "I made choices so you wouldn't have to." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. "I kept the house because it was the only thing that mattered to him," she continued. "And because I believed that if I held onto it long enough, everything else would settle." Tears slid down her face now, silent and steady. But it never did. I realized then that the resentment I thought I saw in her over the years hadn't been resentment at all. It was fear, exhaustion, a lifetime of holding things together with shaking hands. "I didn't sell it to hurt you," I said quietly. "I sold it because I thought I was losing you." She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "And I stayed because I thought I was protecting you." We sat there, holding hands, surrounded by boxes and half-packed memories. For the first time, I saw how alike we were in our silence, in our stubborn love. Later that night, after she went to bed, I opened one of the envelopes she had left behind. Inside was a letter dated years ago, written in a handwriting I barely recognized. As I read, my stomach dropped. The sale of the house wasn't just about safety or money. It was tied to something far bigger than either of us had admitted. And as the truth settled in, I understood that walking away tomorrow would mean confronting a past neither of us had ever been ready to face. The first knock came before sunrise, sharp and impatient, like someone pounding on a truth that refused to stay buried. I was halfway through making coffee when I heard it, my heart jumping even before I reached the door. My mother was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. She hadn't said goodnight to me, just closed her bedroom door softly, like she was afraid even sound might shatter what little peace she had left. When I opened the door, my sister stood there with her arms crossed, hair pulled back too tightly, eyes already blazing. Behind her, our uncle leaned against his car, jaw clenched, pretending he was just there to drive her. "Is it true?" my sister demanded without saying hello. I stepped aside to let them in. "Good morning to you too." "Don't do that," she snapped, brushing past me into the living room. "Don't act like this is normal." My uncle followed more slowly, nodding at me. "Morning," he said, though his tone carried no warmth. My mother appeared at the end of the hallway then, wrapped in her robe, her face pale but composed. The sight of her seemed to ignite something in my sister. "You sold the house?" my sister said, her voice cracking. "You didn't even call me." Mom straightened. "I didn't know I needed permission to lose my own home." "That's not what I meant," my sister shot back. "This place is part of the family." "So was I," Mom replied quietly. The room went silent. I could hear the coffee machine gurgling in the kitchen, the absurd normalcy of it making my stomach twist. Uncle cleared his throat. "Let's all just slow down. Nobody's here to fight." "That's funny," my sister said, "because it feels like one already happened and we weren't invited." She turned to me then, eyes sharp. "You did this, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "I did." Her laugh was short and humorless. "Of course you did. You always think you know what's best." I wanted to defend myself, to explain everything we'd learned the night before, but my mother shook her head slightly. "Not yet." They sat around the dining table, the same one we'd eaten at our whole lives. My sister tapped her nails against the wood, fast and angry. Uncle stared at his hands. "You don't understand what this house represents," my sister said. "Dad worked himself into the ground for this place, and he buried us in debt for it," Mom replied, her voice firmer now. "But you wouldn't know that because I made sure you didn't." My sister blinked. "What are you talking about?" Mom looked at me, then back at her. "There are things I never told either of you." The air shifted. Even Uncle looked up now. She reached for the envelopes again, laying them out like evidence. My sister flipped through them, her anger slowly giving way to shock. "Why didn't you say anything?" She whispered. "Because I was your mother," Mom said. "And it was my job to protect you." My sister's eyes filled with tears she clearly hated. "By lying?" By mid-morning, more people arrived. A cousin, an aunt. News travels fast when there's something to be angry about. The house filled with voices, accusations, memories weaponized and thrown like stones. "You had no right." "She's too old to decide these things." "This is selfish." "This is overdue." Every sentence landed somewhere inside me, bruising parts I hadn't known were exposed. I moved between rooms, offering water, clearing empty cups, anything to keep my hands busy. At one point, I overheard my aunt whispering in the kitchen. She never liked that house anyway. Always thought it trapped her. That wasn't true. Or maybe it was, and that was the problem. The confrontation came when my sister cornered me near the back door. "You didn't even ask me," she said quietly now, the anger drained into something worse. "You just decided." I was scared, I admitted. Scared of losing her. Scared of everything falling apart. She shook her head. "You don't get to be the hero by burning everything down." Outside, the ocean roared louder than it had all morning. The house felt smaller with every word, like it was folding in on itself. Mom called us back into the living room then. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "This fighting ends now," she said. "The house is sold. That part is done. And what about us?" My sister asked. Mom looked around the room at all of us. "That depends on whether you care more about walls than people." No one answered. As the day wore on, people began to leave, one by one, carrying their judgments with them. By late afternoon, only the four of us remained. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. My sister stood by the window, staring out at the water. "I don't know how to forgive this," she said. "I don't know how to ask you to," I replied. Mom sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her years. "Families don't break because of one decision," she said softly. "They break because of all the conversations they never have." That night, after everyone was gone, I lay awake listening to the wind batter the house. I realized then that selling it hadn't just exposed secrets about money or sacrifice. It had forced every one of us to choose what we were willing to lose and what we were still willing to fight for. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, like water seeping through a cracked wall, until suddenly everything was soaked. The morning after everyone left, the house felt hollowed out. Not peaceful, not calm, emptied. My mother sat at the kitchen table with a folded dish towel in her hands, smoothing it over and over as if it had wrinkles only she could see. My sister hadn't stayed the night. She'd left with a stiff hug and a promise to call that never came. I poured cereal into a bowl and let it go soggy, staring at nothing. Outside, the sky was gray, the ocean restless. The kind of day that feels like it's waiting for something bad to happen. "Sit," my mother said quietly. I did. She looked older in the morning light. Not fragile, just tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. "There's more," she said. I didn't answer. I just nodded. She reached into the drawer beside her chair and pulled out a manila folder, thicker than the envelopes from before. She slid it across the table toward me, but didn't let go right away. "I need you to listen," she said. "Not interrupt. Not defend yourself." Not defend yourself? "Just listen." "I can do that," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing. She released the folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, letters from banks, a few handwritten notes I recognized immediately, even before I saw the signature. My father's handwriting had always leaned slightly to the right, like he was in a hurry to get somewhere. I picked up the first page, my fingers cold. What am I looking at? I asked. The reason this house was never really ours, she said. My stomach tightened. She stood and began pacing slowly, one hand pressed against her lower back. After your father got sick, the treatments drained everything. Savings, retirement, insurance only covered part of it. He didn't want you kids to know, so he borrowed. I flipped through the papers, my breath shallow. Borrowed how much? She stopped walking. Enough that selling the house wouldn't even clear it all at first. The room tilted. But you lived here for years after he died, I said. You paid the bills. She gave a sad smile. Barely, and not honestly. I looked up. What does that mean? It means I stopped paying certain things, she said. I chose which debts could wait. I answered some calls and ignored others. I lived with the fear that one day someone would knock on the door and take this place from me. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Why didn't you tell us? I asked again, louder this time. She met my eyes. Because you were building your life. Because your sister was finally happy. Because I didn't want my mistakes to become your burden. I stood abruptly and walked to the sink, gripping the edge until my knuckles went white. The sound of the faucet turning on was too loud. You let me think I was taking something from you, I said, my voice shaking. You let everyone think I betrayed you. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because if I told the truth, you might not have sold it. And then we would have lost everything. I turned to face her. What do you mean? I asked. She inhaled slowly. The buyers didn't just want the house. They wanted it fast, cash, no delays. My heart pounded. Why? She hesitated, then reached back into the folder and pulled out one final document. I recognized the letterhead before I read the words. A notice, final warning, foreclosure proceedings, dated months ago. You were already losing it, I said. She nodded. I was running out of time. The realization hit me so hard I had to sit down. All this time, I thought I was the one forcing change, pushing her out of a place she loved. But the truth was darker and more complicated. The house had been slipping away from her for years, quietly, mercilessly. You knew I was thinking about selling, I said slowly. Yes, and you didn't stop me. No, because you needed me to do it, I said. She looked down at her hands. I needed you to save us. The word us echoed in my head. There was a knock at the door then, sharp and unexpected. Both of us jumped. I opened it to find a man in a suit holding a clipboard, his expression polite but distant. I'm here to inspect the property, he said. Pre-closing walkthrough. I felt my mother stiffen behind me. Of course, I said automatically, stepping aside. As he walked through the house, making notes, opening doors, measuring windows, the reality of it all became unbearable. This wasn't just emotional anymore. It was procedural, official, final. He paused in the living room, glancing at the walls. Beautiful place, he said. Lot of history here. My mother didn't respond. After he left, she sank into the armchair, her strength suddenly gone. I wanted to tell you, she said. So many times. I know, I replied, though part of me still ached with anger. Not at her. at the silence, at the years of carrying things alone. That afternoon, my sister finally called. I put her on speaker. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the foreclosure?" My mother closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "It is." There was a long pause. Then my sister exhaled sharply. "I don't know whether to be angry or relieved." "Both are allowed," my mother said. After the call ended, the house grew quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one was heavy with understanding. As the sun began to set, I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, looking at the empty walls. I realized something then, something that changed the way I saw everything that had happened. Selling the house wasn't the betrayal. The real secret, the one that mattered, was that my mother had been drowning for years and none of us had noticed. And now that I finally saw it, I knew one thing for certain. Walking away tomorrow wasn't just about leaving this place behind. It was about deciding whether I was finally ready to stop letting silence make our choices for us. Silence make our choices for us. The moment everything finally broke open, it wasn't loud, it was a quiet sound, like glass cracking under pressure, and once I heard it, I knew nothing would ever be whole again. The day of the final signing arrived wrapped in gray clouds and unfinished conversations. The house smelled like cardboard and dust, like something already abandoned, even though we were still standing inside it. Boxes lined the hallway walls, labeled in my handwriting kitchen linens. But none of them felt accurate enough to hold what we were actually packing. My mother moved slowly that morning, her steps careful, deliberate. She wore the same sweater she'd worn the day my father was buried. I noticed that only because grief sharpens memory in strange ways. "You don't have to come," I told her softly as I tied my shoes by the door. "I can handle the signing." She shook her head. "If it ends today, I need to see it end." We drove together in silence. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat trying to stay calm. I kept my eyes on the road, afraid that if I looked at her too long, I'd lose the nerve to keep going. At the office, the air was too warm, too bright. Papers were spread neatly across a polished table, our lives reduced to paragraphs and signatures. The buyer smiled politely. The agent explained details we already knew, and my mother nodded at the appropriate moments like she was watching someone else's story unfold. "Sign here," the agent said. Sliding the pen toward her dot, my mother hesitated. I held my breath. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed her name, letter by letter. When she finished, she placed the pen down carefully, like it might break if she moved too fast. "That's it," the agent said cheerfully. "Congratulations." "Congratulations." The word felt cruel. On the drive back, my mother finally spoke. I thought I'd feel relieved. "And?" I asked, "and I just feel tired." Back at the house, my sister was waiting. I hadn't known she was coming. Seeing her there standing in the living room with her arms wrapped around herself sent a shock through me. "You didn't tell me you'd be here," I said. "I didn't ask," she replied. My mother froze in the doorway. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and leave again. "I needed to see it," my sister said, her voice unsteady. "I needed to be here." They stood across from each other, years of unsaid things hanging between them. "I'm sorry," my mother said quietly. My sister laughed softly. the sound breaking in the middle. For what? For protecting us? For lying? For letting us believe we had something solid when we didn't. My mother didn't answer. The tension in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. I set my bag down and moved toward the kitchen, needing something normal to do. "I'll make tea," I said. The kettle took forever to boil. When I returned with 3 mugs, the conversation had shifted into something sharper. "You always do this," my sister said. "You decide everything on your own and call it sacrifice. And you always disappear when things get hard," my mother replied, her voice steadier than I expected. My sister flinched. "That's not fair." "No," my mother said. "But it's true." The room went silent. I stayed, my mother continued. I stayed with the debt, the fear, the nights I couldn't sleep because I thought someone would take the house while I was still alive in it. I stayed so you wouldn't have to. "And did you ever ask if we wanted that?" My sister shot back. "Did you ever think maybe we wanted to help?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want you to feel responsible for my survival." I finally stepped between them. "Enough." They both looked at me. "We're not doing this anymore," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "We're not turning love into a competition over who suffered more." My sister wiped her face. "Then what are we supposed to do?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. That night, after my sister left again, my mother and I sat on the floor of the living room, our backs against the couch. The house echoed in a way it never had before. "I thought being strong meant handling everything alone," she said softly. I didn't realize how lonely that would become. I leaned my head against her shoulder. "I thought being strong meant fixing things before they broke." She took my hand. "We were both wrong." The next morning, the buyers returned to take possession. We walked through the house one last time. My mother paused in every room, touching walls, door frames, memories dot at the front door. She turned back to look at the ocean. "I hope someone loves this place," she said. "I think you already did enough loving for all of us," I replied. We handed over the keys. Outside, the wind was cold. My mother shivered. "Come on," I said. "Let's go." As we walked away, something inside me shifted. The anger, the guilt, the need to be right, it all fell away, leaving something quieter but stronger behind. I realized then that this wasn't the end of a home. It was the moment we finally chose each other over the illusions we'd been protecting. The ocean was gone when I woke up, and for a split second, the silence felt like grief hitting all over again. No waves outside the window. No salt in the air. Just the low hum of traffic somewhere beyond unfamiliar walls, and the dull gray light of a city morning pressing through thin curtains. I lay still, listening, waiting for the sound of my mother moving around the kitchen the way she used to, careful and quiet, as if she were a guest in her own life. But this place was different, smaller, new. Nothing creaked the way it used to. Nothing smelled like the past. I sat up slowly, my feet touching cold tile instead of worn wood. That was the first reminder. The house was gone. The chapter was over. And this, whatever this was, had already begun without asking if I was ready. I found my mother at the small table by the window, holding a mug with both hands. She was fully dressed, hair neatly brushed, like she'd been awake for hours. "You didn't sleep," I said. She smiled faintly. I slept enough? I poured myself coffee and sat across from her. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that magnifies every thought you're trying not to have. It doesn't smell like the ocean, she said suddenly. No, I replied. It doesn't. She looked around the room, taking it in the way she always did when she entered a new place, cataloging exits, light, corners. Survival habits don't disappear just because danger does. It's clean, she said. That's something. It's temporary, I said. We'll make it feel like home. She didn't answer. The first few days blurred together, unpacking, grocery runs, learning the sounds of the building, the neighbor's television through the wall, footsteps overhead, a baby crying somewhere down the hall. My mother moved carefully, like she was afraid to take up too much space. She folded clothes and stacked dishes but didn't decorate, didn't hang anything on the walls. This doesn't have to be permanent, I reminded her one evening as we ate soup from mismatched bowls. Once things settle, we can look for something else. She stirred her soup slowly. I don't need something else. I just need to breathe. That should have comforted me. Instead, it scared me. Because breathing sounded like recovery, and recovery meant eventually asking what came next. My sister visited on the fourth day. She stood in the doorway awkwardly, holding a bag of groceries like a peace offering. I brought food, she said. And patience. I'm still working on that part. My mother smiled, genuinely this time. Come in. They sat together on the couch while I unpacked items in the kitchen, listening without trying to. Their conversation moved cautiously, like a new language neither of them spoke fluently yet. I hated you, my sister admitted quietly. For a while. I know, my mother replied. I hated her too, my sister continued, nodding toward me. I thought she took something from you. My mother glanced at me. She gave me something, even if it hurt. That was the first time I realized the story had shifted. Not healed, not finished, but reframed. Life didn't suddenly become easier. My mother had restless nights. I had moments of guilt so sharp they stole my breath. Some days, anger resurfaced without warning at my father for leaving us with secrets, at myself for thinking I could fix everything, at the house for holding so much power over us even after it was gone. One afternoon, I found my mother standing in the doorway, staring at nothing. What are you thinking about? I asked. She hesitated. I'm thinking about how quiet my mind is, and how loud it used to be. I didn't realize how much fear I carried until it stopped screaming. That night, I cried in the shower so she wouldn't hear me. Weeks passed. The season shifted. My mother began walking in the mornings, learning the rhythm of her new neighborhood. She started laughing again, small laughs at first, then real ones. She cooked recipes she'd avoided for years because they reminded her of my father. Slowly, she reclaimed pieces of herself I hadn't known were missing, and still, something felt unfinished. It came to a head on a Sunday afternoon while we folded laundry together. You don't have to stay, she said suddenly. I froze, holding a towel mid-fold. What do you mean? You put your life on pause for me, she said gently. I see it, and I don't want that to be the cost. I didn't pause it, I replied, though my voice wavered. I redirected it. She reached out and took my hand. You've spent your whole life fixing things for other people. At some point, you have to ask who you're doing it for. The question settled deep inside me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the house, about the choices that led us here, about how easy it is to confuse responsibility with love. I realized then that the beach house hadn't been the only thing holding us hostage. It was the belief that love meant sacrifice without consent, that strength meant silence, that protection meant control. The next morning, I made a decision. I'm applying for that job, I told my mother over breakfast. The one I kept putting off. She smiled. Good, and I'm not disappearing, I added. I'm choosing myself without abandoning you. She nodded. That's all I ever wanted. On my way out the door, I paused, my hand on the knob, and felt something unfamiliar but steady settle in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't running from the past or trying to fix it. I was walking forward, carrying it honestly, without letting it define the shape of everything that came next. And as I stepped into the noise of the city, I understood something that would stay with me forever. Home was never the house. Home was the moment we stopped, mistaking survival for love, and finally learned how to choose both.